Before there was darkness, there was only light. Before there was war, there was perfect peace. Before there was a devil, there was an angel so beautiful that his very name meant bearer of light. Tonight, I want to take you back to a moment that changed everything. Not a moment in human history, but a moment before humanity ever drew its first breath. A moment when heaven itself was torn apart. When the most glorious being ever created looked upon the throne of God and whispered three words that would echo through eternity: "I will ascend." This is the story of the war in heaven. The story of 3 days that shook the foundation of all creation. The story of how Lucifer, the morning star, became Satan, the father of lies. Close your eyes. Let the noise of this world fade away. And let me carry you back to the beginning, to a place of such beauty, such perfection, that no human words can truly capture it. But tonight, we will try. The images you see are only here for illustration. You don't need to watch. Just listen. Let this story wash over you like a gentle tide, carrying you deeper into rest, deeper into peace. And as you drift, remember this: what happened in those 3 days still echoes today. The battle that began in heaven continues on earth. But the end has already been written. Let us begin. Chapter 1. In the beginning, there was light. In the beginning, before the earth was formed, before the stars were hung in the velvet darkness of space, there was heaven. It was not a place as we understand places. It was not built with stones or wood or metal. Heaven was, and is, the dwelling place of God himself. A realm where light does not come from a sun, but from the very presence of the Almighty. Where every surface gleams with a radiance that never fades. Where the air itself hums with worship and time moves differently than it does in our world. Imagine, if you can, a vast expanse of purest crystal, stretching endlessly in every direction. Imagine towers of light rising like mountains, their peaks disappearing into clouds of glory. Imagine rivers flowing not with water, but with liquid fire that does not burn, that brings only life and joy to all who drink from it. And in the center of it all, the throne. The throne of God is not made of gold, though gold would seem like dust in comparison. It is not made of jewels, though every jewel in creation would pale beside it. The throne is made of glory itself. It radiates light in waves, in colors that human eyes have never seen. And from that throne comes a sound, a voice, not loud but so filled with authority, with power, with love, that every created being trembles at its resonance. Around the throne, in perfect order, stood the angels. Not hundreds, not thousands, millions upon millions of celestial beings, each one crafted by the hand of God for a specific purpose. They were not all the same. Just as humans have different roles, different gifts, different callings, so too did the angels. There were the seraphim, beings of pure fire, who stood closest to the throne. They had 6 wings each. With 2 wings they covered their faces, for even they could not look directly upon the full glory of God. With 2 wings they covered their feet in reverence. And with 2 wings they flew, hovering above the throne, crying out in voices that shook the foundations of heaven, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was, and is to come." Their voices were not harsh. They were like the sound of a great waterfall, powerful yet beautiful, constant yet never monotonous. Day and night, without ceasing, they sang. And their song was not born of duty, but of love. For they had seen the face of God, and having seen it, they could do nothing but worship. Below the seraphim stood the cherubim, mighty guardians with 4 faces each, the face of a man, the face of a lion, the face of an ox, and the face of an eagle. They represented all of creation, all of life, all of strength and wisdom and majesty. Their wings were covered with eyes, thousands of eyes, seeing everything, missing nothing. They moved in perfect unison, never turning, always forward, always watching, always protecting the holiness of God. And then there were the archangels, the princes of heaven, the commanders of the angelic hosts. These were not merely servants. They were leaders, warriors, messengers of the Most High. Each one carried authority that could shake worlds. Each one bore a name that reflected their purpose. There was Michael, whose name means, "Who is like God." He stood tall and strong, with a face like carved marble and eyes like flames of fire. In his hand, he carried a sword that gleamed with holy light, a weapon forged not for destruction, but for the defense of all that is good and true. Michael was the protector, the warrior, the one who would stand between evil and the throne of God, no matter the cost. There was Gabriel, whose name means, "God is my strength." He was the messenger, the herald, the voice of heaven sent to announce the will of the Almighty. His wings were white as snow, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of divine authority. He was swift, moving between heaven and earth in the blink of an eye, delivering messages that would change the course of history. There was Raphael, the healer, whose very presence brought comfort and restoration. His wings glowed with a soft golden light, and his face was gentle, full of compassion. He walked among the angels, tending to their needs, reminding them of God's love, his mercy, his endless grace. And then there was Lucifer. Lucifer, the morning star. Lucifer, the light-bearer. Lucifer, the most beautiful of all created beings. If the other archangels were like flames, Lucifer was like the sun itself. His beauty was not merely physical, though his form was perfect in every way. His beauty was deeper, more profound. It radiated from within, a reflection of the divine glory that had been placed inside him. His wings were vast, covered with every precious stone, sapphire and emerald, ruby and topaz, jasper and carnelian. When he moved, light danced across his wings in cascading waves of color, filling heaven with splendor. His voice was unmatched. It was said that when Lucifer sang, all of heaven fell silent to listen. Even the seraphim paused in their endless worship to hear the sound. His voice was pure, clear, powerful, and achingly beautiful. It could convey joy, sorrow, reverence, triumph. It could soar to heights that made the stars tremble, or drop to whispers that brought tears to the eyes of the angels. He was the worship leader of heaven, the one chosen by God himself to stand before the throne and lead all of creation in praise. It was the highest honor, the most sacred calling, and Lucifer fulfilled it with excellence. He poured his entire being into worship, weaving melodies that had never been heard before, harmonies that seemed to unlock new dimensions of beauty. God loved him, not more than the others, for God's love is infinite and equal, but in a special way. Lucifer was a masterpiece, a living testament to the creative genius of the Almighty. He was proof that God does not create merely for function, but for beauty, for art, for the sheer joy of bringing something glorious into existence. And Lucifer knew it. He looked at himself and saw the splendor. He heard his own voice and marveled at its power. He saw the way the other angels looked at him with admiration, with respect, even with awe. And somewhere, deep in the hidden places of his heart, a thought began to form. It was not a loud thought at first. It was barely a whisper, easy to ignore, easy to push away. But it was there, like a tiny crack in a perfect diamond, invisible from the outside but growing, spreading, waiting for the right moment to shatter everything. For now, though, heaven remained at peace. The angels moved in perfect harmony, each fulfilling their role with joy and devotion. There was no discord, no jealousy, no strife. There was only worship, only service, only love. Michael stood at his post, sword in hand, watching over the throne with eyes that never closed. Gabriel flew between the realms, carrying messages with speed and precision. Raphael tended to the needs of heaven with gentle hands and a compassionate heart. And Lucifer sang. He stood before the throne, his wings outstretched, his face lifted toward the light, and he sang. The sound filled every corner of heaven, weaving through the streets of gold, echoing off the crystal walls, rising up and up until it seemed to merge with the very voice of God himself. The other angels joined in, their voices blending with his, creating a symphony of such beauty that if a human ear could have heard it, the heart would have stopped from sheer, overwhelming joy. This was worship in its purest form. This was creation fulfilling its purpose. This was everything as it was meant to be. But even then, even in that moment of perfect beauty, the crack was spreading. Lucifer sang, and his voice was flawless. But his eyes, if anyone had looked closely, were no longer fixed on the throne. They were drifting, just slightly, just for a moment, to his own reflection in the crystal beneath his feet. And in that reflection, he saw himself. Beautiful, powerful, glorious. And he began to wonder. The thought was still small, still quiet. But it was there, and it was growing. Heaven did not know it yet, but the countdown had begun. The perfect peace was living on borrowed time. The light was about to be challenged by a darkness that had never existed before, a darkness that would not come from outside, but from within. For now, the angels sang. The throne blazed with glory, and all of creation bowed in reverence before the one who made them. But the seed had been planted, and soon, very soon, it would sprout. The morning star was about to fall, and when he fell, he would not fall alone. Chapter 2. The Seed of Pride. There are moments in eternity that change everything. Moments so small, so quiet, that they pass unnoticed by all but one. Moments that happen not in the thunder of battle or the blaze of glory, but in the silence of a single thought. For Lucifer, that moment came on what seemed like an ordinary day in heaven. If heaven could be said to have days, if eternity could be measured in moments, he stood, as he always did, before the throne. The light washed over him in waves, warm and pure. The voices of the seraphim rose and fell in their endless song. The presence of God filled every space, every breath, every heartbeat of existence. Lucifer lifted his voice to join the chorus. The sound that came from his lips was, as always, perfect. Notes cascaded from him like water from a fountain, clear and bright and beautiful. The other angels turned toward him, their faces glowing with joy at the sound. And in that moment, something shifted. It was not the music. The music was flawless. It was not the worship. The worship was pure. It was something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface of the song. Lucifer sang, but for the first time in his existence, he was not thinking about God. He was thinking about himself. He noticed, as if for the first time, how the light caught on his wings, scattering rainbows across the crystal floor. He noticed how the other angels looked at him, their eyes filled with admiration. He noticed the power in his own voice, the way it seemed to command attention, to draw every gaze toward him. And he thought, I am magnificent. It was not an untrue thought. He was magnificent. God had made him that way. Every fiber of his being was crafted for beauty, for excellence, for glory. But the thought did not stop there. I am magnificent, he thought again. More magnificent than the others. More beautiful than Michael, more powerful than Gabriel, more splendid than any creature that has ever been made. Still, The thought continued. If I am so glorious, the whisper came from somewhere deep inside, then why do I bow? Why do I serve? Why do I stand here singing praises to another when I myself am worthy of praise? The thought hit him like a lightning bolt. He faltered just for a fraction of a second. His voice caught, his wings trembled. It was so brief that no one noticed. The song continued around him. The worship flowed on without interruption. But Lucifer noticed. He stopped singing. His mouth closed. His eyes, which had been lifted toward the throne, slowly lowered. He looked down at his hands, at the light that seemed to emanate from his very skin. He looked at his reflection in the polished surface beneath his feet, and for the first time he did not see a servant. He saw a rival. The thought should have horrified him. It should have sent him to his knees in repentance, crying out to God for mercy, for cleansing, for the removal of this poison that had entered his mind. But he did not cry out. Instead, he stood there in silence, turning the thought over and over in his mind like a jewel, examining it from every angle. Why should I bow? The voice whispered again. I am beautiful. I am powerful. I am wise. What makes him so different from me? What gives him the right to rule, and me the obligation to serve? The questions came faster now, tumbling over each other, building momentum like a stone rolling down a hill. He sits on the throne, but could I not sit there just as easily? He receives the worship, but is my voice not sweeter? He commands the angels, but do they not already look to me with love and respect? And then, the darkest thought of all. What if I am not meant to serve? What if I am meant to rule? The moment those words formed in his mind, something changed. Not in heaven. Heaven remained as it always was, radiant and perfect and holy. But in Lucifer, something broke. Something that could never be repaired. It was as if a door had opened inside him, a door that had always been locked, a door that was never meant to be opened. And through that door poured a flood of thoughts, of desires, of ambitions that he had never known before. He imagined himself on the throne. He imagined the angels bowing before him. He imagined his voice not raised in worship, but receiving it. He imagined a kingdom where he was not the servant, but the king. And the image did not repel him. It thrilled him. He looked up at the throne again, and this time he did not see the source of all life, all love, all goodness. He saw an obstacle, a barrier between himself and what he deserved. The light that had always comforted him now seemed harsh, exposing. The presence that had always filled him with joy now felt oppressive, suffocating. The voice of God, which had always been the most beautiful sound in all creation, now sounded like a chain, binding him to a role he no longer wanted to play. Lucifer took a step back from the throne. It was a small step, barely noticeable, but it was the first step away from God that any created being had ever taken. And once the first step was taken, the second came easier. He turned away from the throne and walked through the streets of heaven. His mind raced, spinning with possibilities, with plans, with visions of what could be. But he knew he could not do this alone. If he was going to challenge the throne of God, he would need an army. He would need followers, allies, angels who shared his vision, who felt the same restlessness, the same desire for something more. He thought of the angels under his command, the ones who looked to him for leadership in worship. He thought of their loyalty, their admiration, their trust. And he began to form a plan. He would not announce his intentions openly. Not yet. That would be foolish. God would crush the rebellion before it even began. No, he would be subtle. He would plant seeds, just as a seed had been planted in his own heart. He would ask questions, raise doubts, stir longings that the angels did not even know they had. He would start with those closest to him, the ones who trusted him most. He would speak to them in private, in whispers, in the quiet moments when the worship had ended and the throne room had emptied. And he would watch. He would wait. He would see who responded, who resonated with his message, who was willing to consider the unthinkable. The thought brought a smile to his face. Not a smile of joy, but something colder, something sharper. It was the first time in all of eternity that an angel had smiled without love in his heart. He spread his wings and flew to the outer courts of heaven, where the lesser angels dwelt. As he moved through the light, he rehearsed his words, his arguments, his seductions. He did not know it yet, but he had already lost. The moment he chose himself over God, the moment pride took root in his heart, his fate was sealed. There could be no victory in rebellion against the Almighty. There could only be ruin. But pride is a blinding thing. It convinces the heart that it is wiser than it is, stronger than it is, more deserving than it is. And Lucifer, the light-bearer, the morning star, was now blind. He no longer saw the truth. He saw only what he wanted to see. And what he wanted was a throne that would never be his. The rebellion had begun, not with a war, not with a battle, but with a thought, a single, poisonous thought that would soon spread like wildfire through the halls of heaven. And before long, the light would be challenged by darkness. The perfect peace would be shattered by war, and the morning star would begin his long, terrible fall. Chapter 3. Whispers in Paradise. Heaven had never known secrecy before. Everything in that holy place had always been open, transparent, bathed in the light of God's presence. There were no shadows to hide in, no dark corners where whispers could be concealed. Angels moved freely, spoke freely, loved freely, with hearts that had nothing to hide and no reason to hide anything. But now, for the first time, there were secrets. Lucifer had become a master of them. He moved through heaven with the same grace he had always possessed, his wings gleaming, his voice still raised in worship when he stood before the throne. To the casual observer, nothing had changed. The morning star was still the morning star, brilliant and beautiful and devoted. But those who looked closely, those who knew him well, began to notice small things. The way his eyes no longer seemed to focus on the throne during worship, but drifted to the angels around him, measuring, calculating, assessing. The way he lingered after the others had left, speaking quietly with certain angels, his voice low and urgent. The way he smiled, but the smile no longer reached his eyes. Michael noticed. He stood at his post near the throne, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, and he watched. Michael had known Lucifer since the beginning, had fought beside him, had worshipped beside him, had called him brother. And now something in his spirit was troubled. He could not name it at first. It was just a feeling, a sense that something was wrong, that the harmony of heaven had developed a discordant note. One day, after the worship had ended, Michael approached Lucifer. "Brother," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "Walk with me." Lucifer turned, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face. Annoyance, suspicion. It was gone so quickly that Michael could not be sure he had seen it at all. "Of course," Lucifer said smoothly. "I always have time for you, Michael." They walked together through the streets of gold, past fountains of living water, past gardens where flowers bloomed in colors that had no names. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them was not comfortable as it once had been. It felt heavy, weighted with things unsaid. Finally, Michael spoke. "Is everything well with you, Lucifer?" "Of course," Lucifer replied, too quickly. "Why would it not be?" "I do not know," Michael said slowly, "but I sense a change in you, a distance, as if your heart is no longer fully here. Lucifer stopped walking. He turned to face Michael, and his expression was unreadable. "My heart," he said softly, "is exactly where it has always been." It was not a lie, not technically. His heart was still in heaven, but it was no longer with God. Michael studied him for a long moment. "If something troubles you," he said, "you can speak to me. We are brothers. There is nothing that cannot be shared in the light." Lucifer smiled, and this time it was genuine, though not kind. "You are right, Michael. We are brothers. But tell me, have you never wondered why some brothers are given swords, while others are given songs? Why some stand guard, while others stand in glory?" Michael frowned. "Each of us has the role God has given us. Each role is necessary, each is good." "Good," Lucifer repeated, tasting the word. "Yes, but is good enough? Is it not possible that some of us were meant for more than what God has given?" Michael's voice hardened. "There is no more than what comes from his hand." Lucifer's smile faded. "Of course," he said quietly. "You are right. Forgive me. I spoke foolishly." But Michael was not reassured. He watched as Lucifer turned and walked away, his wings catching the light, scattering brilliance in his wake. And Michael knew, with a certainty that settled like stone in his chest, that something had gone terribly wrong. But Lucifer was not speaking only to Michael. In the days that followed, he sought out others. Angels who served under him in the choir. Angels who had shown him particular devotion. Angels whose hearts, he sensed, might be open to his message. He did not speak of rebellion. Not yet. That word would have sent them fleeing in horror. Instead, he spoke of freedom, of potential, of the unfairness of a system where some were exalted and others overlooked. He found an angel named Beelzebub who served among the cherubim. Beelzebub was strong, intelligent, ambitious. He had always performed his duties with excellence, but there was a restlessness in him, a hunger for recognition that had never been fully satisfied. Lucifer approached him in a quiet moment when the worship had ended and the throne room was empty. "Beelzebub," he said warmly, "you served well today." Beelzebub bowed his head. "Thank you, my lord. I seek only to please the Most High." "And you do," Lucifer assured him. "But tell me, have you never felt that your gifts are wasted in such simple tasks? A being of your strength, your wisdom, standing guard over a throne that needs no guarding." Beelzebub looked up, surprised. I serve where I am called." "Of course you do," Lucifer said. "As do we all. But what if there were another way? What if we did not have to wait for a calling, but could choose our own paths? What if we were not servants, but equals?" The word hung in the air between them. "Equals," Beelzebub whispered, with God." Lucifer placed a hand on his shoulder. "Is it so impossible? Look at yourself. Look at what you are. Do you not carry divine light? Do you not possess power and wisdom and glory? What is the difference between you and the one on the throne, except that he was first and you came after?" Beelzebub's eyes widened. The thought had never occurred to him before. It was blasphemous, unthinkable, utterly contrary to everything he had ever known. And yet, the thought took root. "What are you suggesting?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Lucifer leaned closer. "I am suggesting," he said softly, "that we do not have to live as servants forever. That there is another way, a better way. A way where we take our rightful place, where we are honored as we deserve, where we answer to no one but ourselves." He paused, letting the words sink in. But I cannot walk that path alone, he continued. I need those who see as I see, those who are brave enough to reach for something greater, those who will stand with me when the moment comes. Stand with you. Beelzebub's voice trembled. Against him. Lucifer did not answer directly. Instead, he asked, do you love him because you choose to, or because you were made to? It was a question designed to unravel everything, and it worked. Beelzebub stood there, silent, his mind racing. He had never questioned before. He had never doubted. But now, the seed had been planted. Think on it, Lucifer said, stepping back. We will speak again. And he left Beelzebub standing there, alone, with a choice that would determine his eternal fate. One by one, Lucifer went to the angels. Not all of them. He was careful, strategic. He chose those he thought would listen, those whose hearts he could turn. He spoke to them of freedom, of justice, of the unfairness of serving a God who demanded worship but gave nothing in return. He twisted the truth, took the goodness of God and reframed it as tyranny, took the love of God and called it control. And shockingly, terribly, some of them listened. Not because they hated God. Most of them still loved him, in their way. But Lucifer was persuasive. His words were smooth, his logic compelling. He made rebellion sound noble, made pride sound like self-respect, made treason sound like liberation. And slowly, carefully, an army began to form. Angels, who had once stood in perfect harmony, now gathered in secret, speaking in hushed voices, planning, preparing. They did not yet know what they were preparing for. Lucifer had not told them everything, but they knew they were following him, and that was enough. By the time Michael realized how far the corruption had spread, it was almost too late. He went to Gabriel, his face grave. "We have a problem," he said. Gabriel looked up from the scroll he was reading. "What kind of problem?" "Lucifer," Michael said simply. "He is gathering followers, planting seeds of doubt. I have heard whispers, Gabriel. Whispers of rebellion." Gabriel's face went pale. "Rebellion? In heaven? That is impossible." "I thought so too," Michael said. "But I have watched him. I have listened, and I tell you, brother, the impossible is happening. Lucifer is turning angels away from God." Gabriel stood, his wings flaring. "Then we must stop him. We must go to the throne, tell the Most High what is happening." Michael shook his head slowly. "The Most High already knows. He knows everything. If he has not acted, it is because he is waiting, giving them time, giving Lucifer time to choose. Choose." Gabriel's voice rose. "He has already chosen. He is leading angels into darkness." "Yes," Michael said quietly. "And soon, very soon, the choice will become action. And when it does, there will be war." The two archangels stood there, looking at each other, the weight of what was coming pressing down on them like a physical force. War. In heaven, the very thought was madness. But madness had already taken root, and it was spreading. Across heaven, in the hearts of thousands of angels, the decision was being made. Some remained faithful, clinging to their love for God, refusing to listen to Lucifer's lies. But others, nearly a third of all the angelic host, were wavering. They had not yet openly rebelled, but they were listening, considering, being drawn, slowly but surely, into the orbit of the morning star. And Lucifer, seeing his army grow, felt his confidence swell. He began to believe his own lies. He began to think that victory was possible, that he could actually challenge God and win. He did not see the trap he was walking into. He did not understand that pride had made him blind, that every step he took was leading him closer to his own destruction. All he saw was the throne, and the throne was all he wanted. The whispers in paradise were growing louder. Soon they would become shouts, and then they would become war. Chapter 4. The line is drawn. There comes a moment in every conflict when words end and action begins, when the tension that has been building finally reaches its breaking point, when the choice that everyone has been avoiding can no longer be delayed. For heaven, that moment arrived like the slow dawn of a terrible day. It began with silence. The worship that had always filled every corner of heaven, the endless song of praise that rose from millions of voices, began to falter. Not all at once, not dramatically, but here and there, voices dropped out. Angels who had always sung with fervor now stood mute, their lips pressed together, their eyes distant. The seraphim noticed first. Their song, which had never ceased since the moment of their creation, suddenly sounded thin, incomplete. They looked around, confused, sensing the absence but not understanding it. Then they saw, throughout the vast expanse of heaven, angels were moving. Not toward the throne, as they always had, but away from it. They were gathering in a different place, at the far edge of the crystal sea, where Lucifer stood with his wings spread wide, addressing the crowd that had assembled before him. His voice carried across the distance, clear and powerful and terribly persuasive. "Brothers," he was saying, "sisters, fellow bearers of light. For too long, we have bowed. For too long, we have served without question, without voice, without choice. We were told this was love, but I ask you, is it love to demand worship? Is it love to create beings with the capacity for greatness, only to keep them forever beneath you?" The angels before him murmured, some nodding, some looking uncertain. Lucifer continued, his voice rising, "We are not lesser beings. We carry the same divine spark, the same power, the same glory. The only difference between us and the one on the throne is that he will not share it. He hoards his authority, his dominion, his honor, and calls it righteousness." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But I say to you, there is another way. A way where we are not servants, but sovereigns. Where we do not beg for scraps of recognition, but take our rightful place as equals. Where the light that shines from us is not reflected, but our own." His eyes blazed with passion, with conviction, with the absolute certainty of the self-deceived. "I will ascend," he declared, his voice ringing like a bell across heaven. "I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the Mount of Assembly, in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High." The words hung in the air, terrible and beautiful and utterly damning. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. And then, slowly, one angel stepped forward. Then another, then another. They came to stand beside Lucifer, their faces set, their wings trembling with fear and exhilaration and the awful thrill of rebellion. By the time the movement stopped, nearly 1/3 of all the angels in heaven had crossed the line. Thousands upon thousands of celestial beings, turning their backs on the throne, choosing the promise of independence over the reality of love. On the other side of the divide, Michael stood with his sword drawn. Not raised, not yet, but drawn, ready. Around him gathered the faithful, the angels who had refused Lucifer's call, who had heard his words and recoiled in horror. Gabriel stood at Michael's right hand, his face pale but resolute. Raphael stood at his left, tears streaming down his face as he watched friends, brothers, companions of countless ages, walk away from everything they had ever known. "How did this happen?" Raphael whispered. How did we not see? We saw, Gabriel said quietly. We simply did not believe it could go this far. Michael said nothing. His eyes were fixed on Lucifer, standing across the crystal sea, surrounded by his army of followers. The two archangels, once closer than brothers, now separated by a chasm that could never be crossed. Michael felt something he had never experienced before. Grief. Deep, wrenching, unbearable grief. Not for himself, but for Lucifer. For the brother he was about to lose. For the beauty that was about to be destroyed. For the choice that could never be unmade. He wanted to call out, to beg Lucifer to reconsider, to turn back before it was too late. But he knew it would be useless. The pride in Lucifer's eyes was absolute. There would be no reasoning with him, no persuading him, no saving him from himself. The line had been drawn, and soon, very soon, they would have to fight. But before the first blow was struck, before the first sword was raised, the voice of God echoed through heaven. It was not loud. God's voice never needs to be loud. It simply is, filling every space, every heart, every corner of existence with its presence. Lucifer. The single word stopped everything. The murmuring crowds fell silent. The movement ceased. Every eye turned toward the throne, where the light blazed brighter than ever. Lucifer stood frozen, his wings half spread, his mouth open to speak another word of rebellion. But the words died on his lips. Lucifer, the voice came again, and this time there was sorrow in it. Deep, infinite sorrow. The sorrow of a father watching his child destroy himself. You have chosen your path, God said. But before you walk it, I will give you one final chance to turn back. Kneel before me now. Confess your pride. Ask for forgiveness. And I will restore you to your place, as if this rebellion had never been. The offer hung in the air, shimmering with possibility. Michael held his breath. Every faithful angel held their breath. Even some of those standing with Lucifer seemed to waver, hope flickering in their eyes. This was it, the moment of decision, the last opportunity for redemption. Lucifer stood there, the light of God's presence washing over him, warming him, calling him back. And for just a second, just the briefest fraction of a moment, his expression softened. His wings drooped, his eyes filled with something that might have been regret. But then his jaw tightened, his eyes hardened, his wings spread wide once more. No, he said, and his voice was cold as stone. I will not kneel. Not now. Not ever. I would rather rule in darkness than serve in light. The words echoed through heaven like a death sentence, because that is exactly what they were. So be it, God said, and the sorrow in his voice was replaced by something else. Something final, something absolute. Michael stepped forward, his sword now raised, gleaming with holy fire. Yes, Lord, he said, his voice steady despite the breaking of his heart. Defend my throne, God commanded. Cast out the rebels. Let those who have chosen darkness dwell in darkness. Let those who have rejected my love learn what it means to live without it. Michael bowed his head. It will be done. He turned to face Lucifer across the divide, and their eyes met. Once, those eyes had looked at each other with friendship, with brotherhood, with love. Now, there was only sadness on one side and hatred on the other. Brother, Michael said quietly, one last time. Please, do not do this. Lucifer smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You were always weak, Michael. Always too bound by duty, too afraid to reach for greatness. When this is over, when I sit on that throne, I will remember your loyalty, and I will pity you for it. Michael closed his eyes briefly, letting the pain wash over him. Then he opened them, and when he did, There was no more room for mercy. "Then let it begin," he said. Across heaven, the armies formed. The faithful on one side, blazing with holy light, their weapons drawn, their faces set with grim determination. The rebels on the other, dark shadows beginning to creep into their radiance, their eyes wild with defiance and fear. Between them, the crystal sea stretched like a vast battlefield, waiting to be stained with something it had never known before. Conflict, violence, war. The angels had been created for worship, for service, for love. But now they would have to learn something new. They would have to learn how to destroy each other. Lucifer raised his hand, and his voice thundered across the divide. For freedom, for glory, for ourselves. His army roared in response, a sound like the rushing of a great wind, terrible and exhilarating. Michael raised his sword, and it blazed with light so pure, so bright, that even the rebels had to shield their eyes. "For the Most High," he cried, "for righteousness, for love," and the faithful answered with a shout that shook the foundations of heaven itself. For a long moment, the two armies stood facing each other, neither moving, neither backing down. And then, like the breaking of a dam, the restraint shattered. The rebels charged forward, their wings carrying them across the crystal sea in a dark tide. The faithful met them head-on, light crashing against shadow in an explosion that lit up all of heaven. The war had begun. 3 days of battle that would reshape eternity. 3 days that would end with the morning star falling like lightning from heaven. 3 days that would create the enemy humanity would fight for all of time. And as the first blow was struck, as the first sword met the first shield, as the first cry of pain echoed through a place that had never known pain before, one thing became terribly, finally, irreversibly clear. Heaven would never be the same again. Chapter 5. Day 1. The battle begins. The first sound of war in heaven was not a shout or a scream. It was the ringing of metal against metal. The clash of Michael's sword against Lucifer's blade, striking sparks that fell like stars toward the crystal sea below. The two armies collided in the center of heaven, and the impact sent shockwaves rippling through the realm. Light met shadow in an explosion of color and force. Angels, who had never known violence, were suddenly locked in combat, grappling with those who had once stood beside them in worship. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrible, heartbreaking chaos. Michael fought at the front, his sword moving in arcs of pure white fire. Every strike was precise, controlled, purposeful. He did not fight with rage, but with sorrow. Each blow he landed, each rebel he struck down, felt like cutting off a piece of his own soul. But he did not stop. He could not stop. To his right, Gabriel moved like lightning, his spear flashing as he defended against 3 attackers at once. His face was set in grim determination, his wings beating with thunderous force as he drove the rebels back step by step. To his left, Raphael fought with tears streaming down his face. His staff glowed with golden light, creating shields of protection around the faithful, healing those who fell wounded. But even as he healed, he wept for those he could not save, for those who had chosen the wrong side. Across the battlefield, Lucifer commanded his forces with terrible brilliance. He had been created as a leader, and that gift had not left him even in rebellion. His voice rang out above the clash of battle, directing his troops, encouraging them, inspiring them to fight harder, to push further. "Do not yield," he shouted. "We are fighting for our freedom. For our right to be more than servants. Press forward, the throne will be ours." His followers believed him. They fought with desperate courage, throwing themselves against the faithful with wild abandon. Some fought because they truly believed in Lucifer's cause. Others fought because they had already crossed the line, and there was no going back. and still others fought simply because they were afraid of what would happen if they stopped. The crystal sea beneath them began to crack under the weight of the battle. Fissures spread across its surface, and from those fissures rose clouds of mist that obscured the combatants, making it hard to tell friend from foe. An angel named Azrael, who had once led songs of praise beside Lucifer, now found himself face to face with Uriel, one of the faithful archangels. They had been friends once, had shared countless conversations about the beauty of creation, the majesty of God, the joy of worship. Now they circled each other with weapons drawn. "Azrael," Uriel said, his voice pleading, "it is not too late. Lay down your sword. Ask for mercy. The Lord's compassion is greater than your rebellion." Azrael's face twisted with pain and anger. "Mercy," he spat. "What mercy was shown to us when we were created only to bow? When we were given power but forbidden to use it? When we were made in his image but told we could never be his equal? We were never meant to be his equal," Uriel cried. "We were meant to be his children, his beloved. That is a greater honor than any throne. You are a slave who has learned to love his chains," Azrael said coldly. "I pity you." He lunged forward, his blade aimed at Uriel's heart. Uriel parried, his own weapon moving on instinct, and the two former friends became enemies, their swords singing a song of broken fellowship. The battle raged for what felt like hours, though time moved strangely in that place. There was no sun to mark its passage, no clock to count the moments. There was only the endless struggle, the clash of light and darkness, the cries of the wounded and the shouts of the defiant. The faithful fought with discipline and purpose. They held their formation, protected each other, moved as one unified force. They fought not for themselves, but for something greater than themselves. The rebels fought with passion and desperation. They broke ranks, attacked recklessly, driven by emotion rather than strategy. Some fought with brilliant courage. Others fought with growing fear as they realized that Lucifer's promises might have been lies. And slowly, gradually, the tide began to turn. Not because the faithful were stronger. In terms of raw power, the two sides were evenly matched. But the faithful had something the rebels did not. They had purpose. They had unity. They had love. The rebels had only pride. And pride, for all its fierce energy, is a brittle foundation. It cannot sustain. It cannot endure. One by one, angels began to fall. When an angel falls in battle, they do not die as humans do. They cannot die. They are eternal beings, created to exist forever. But they can be defeated. They can be broken. They can be cast down. The first rebel to fall was an angel named Semjaza. He had been one of Lucifer's most loyal followers, one of the first to join the rebellion. He fought with savage fury, cutting down two of the faithful before Gabriel finally struck him down. As he fell, his light began to fade. The radiance that had once covered him like a garment dimmed, flickered, and began to go out. His wings, which had gleamed like polished bronze, turned gray and brittle. His face, once beautiful, twisted into something darker, something bitter. He did not die. But he was no longer what he had been. He was becoming something else, something less, something fallen. The sight sent a ripple of fear through the rebel ranks. They had not understood, until that moment, what defeat would mean. They had thought they were fighting for freedom, for glory, for power. They had not realized they were fighting to lose everything. But it was too late to stop. The battle had its own momentum now, carrying them forward whether they willed it or not. As the first day of battle drew toward its close, both armies pulled back, exhausted and bloodied. The faithful retreated to positions near the throne, their ranks diminished but unbroken. They tended to their wounded, mourned those who had fallen, and prepared for the next assault. Michael stood at the front, his sword still drawn, his eyes scanning the battlefield. His armor was dented, his wings scorched, but his resolve had not wavered. Gabriel approached, limping slightly from a wound on his leg. "The first day is over," he said quietly. "But the rebels have not given up. They are regrouping, planning their next move." "I know," Michael said. "Lucifer is many things, but he is not a fool. He will learn from today's mistakes. Tomorrow will be harder." Raphael joined them, his face drawn with grief. "I counted the fallen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. 3,000 of the faithful, 7,000 of the rebels." Michael closed his eyes. 10,000 angels, 10,000 souls who will never be what they were meant to be. "And the battle has only just begun," Gabriel said. They stood there in silence, 3 archangels who had never known war before, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. Across the battlefield, in the rebel camp, Lucifer stood among his followers. His face was dark with anger and frustration. The first day had not gone as he had planned. He had expected a quick victory, a decisive blow that would send the faithful fleeing and leave the throne undefended. Instead, he had lost 7,000 of his army and gained nothing. Beelzebub approached, his armor scorched and dented. "My lord," he said hesitantly, "some of the others are beginning to question. They are afraid. They did not expect." "I know what they expected," Lucifer snapped. "They expected an easy victory. They expected glory without cost. But that is not how thrones are won." He turned to address the assembled rebels, his voice ringing with forced confidence. "This is only the first day," he declared. "Yes, we have suffered losses. Yes, the battle was harder than we anticipated. But we have not been defeated. We still stand. We still fight. And we will not stop until that throne is ours." Some of the angels cheered, rallying to his words. But others remained silent, their eyes haunted, their hearts filled with doubt. Lucifer saw their hesitation, and it enraged him. But he pushed the anger down, forced his face into a mask of certainty. "Rest tonight," he commanded. "Heal your wounds. Sharpen your blades. Tomorrow we will strike harder. Tomorrow we will break their lines. Tomorrow the throne will fall." The rebels dispersed, moving to their camps, speaking in low voices among themselves. And Lucifer stood alone, staring across the battlefield toward the distant glow of the throne. He had come too far to turn back, had sacrificed too much to surrender, had promised too much to admit he was wrong. So he would fight. And if he could not win, he would at least ensure that heaven paid the highest price possible for its loyalty. The first day had ended. 2 more days of battle remained. And before those days were over, the morning star would learn the true cost of pride. The crystal sea beneath his feet was already stained with the light of fallen angels. Soon it would be stained with his own. Chapter 6. Day 2. The tide turns. The second day began not with the clash of swords, but with silence. A heavy, oppressive silence that hung over heaven like a shroud. The light that had always filled every corner of that holy place seemed dimmer now, as if creation itself was mourning what had been lost. Michael stood at his post, watching the horizon where the rebel forces were gathering. He had not slept. Angels did not need sleep as humans do, but they could rest, could restore themselves. Michael had chosen not to. He had spent the night in prayer, his sword planted in the crystal ground before him, his head bowed before the throne. He had asked for strength, for wisdom, for the grace to do what had to be done without losing himself in the process. Now, As the second day dawned, he felt the weight of command pressing down on him like never before. Yesterday had been chaos, instinct, reaction. Today would be different. Today, both sides knew what they were facing. Today, the battle would be strategic, calculated, brutal. Gabriel approached, his face grim. "The scouts have returned," he said. "Lucifer has reorganized his forces. He has placed his strongest warriors at the front, planning a direct assault on our center. He means to break through to the throne itself." Michael nodded slowly. "Then we will meet him there. Reinforce the center. Pull warriors from the flanks if necessary. The throne must not be threatened." "And if he breaks through anyway?" Gabriel asked quietly. Michael's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. "He will not break through. I will stop him myself if I must." The determination in his voice left no room for doubt. Across the battlefield, Lucifer was addressing his commanders. His eyes were wild now, burning with an intensity that bordered on madness. The doubt he had seen in his followers last night had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. "Today," he said, his voice low and fierce, "we end this. No more hesitation, no more mercy. We strike at the heart of their defense. We push through to the throne. And when we stand before it, when we see the fear in their eyes, they will understand that we were right, that we were always meant for more than servitude." Beelzebub shifted uncomfortably. "My lord, yesterday's losses were severe. Perhaps we should consider what?" Lucifer whirled on him, his wings flaring. "Surrender. Crawling back to beg for forgiveness. Is that what you suggest?" "No, my lord. I only meant, we have come too far." Lucifer cut him off. "There is no going back. There is only forward. Only victory or oblivion, and I choose victory." He turned back to the assembled host, raising his voice so all could hear. "They think we will break. They think fear will drive us back. But they do not understand what drives us. We fight not for a master, but for ourselves. We fight not out of duty, but out of choice. And that makes us stronger than they can ever be." The rebels roared their approval, but even as they did, some of the angels in the back ranks exchanged uncertain glances. They had heard these words before. Yesterday, those words had led to 7,000 of their brothers falling, but they had nowhere else to go. So they raised their weapons and prepared to fight. The armies met in the center of the battlefield with a crash that echoed through all of heaven. This time, there was no hesitation, no moment of silence before the violence began. Both sides threw themselves into combat with desperate fury. The fighting was fiercer than it had been on the first day. More focused, more deadly. Angels who had learned harsh lessons yesterday applied them today, striking with greater precision, defending with greater skill. Michael led the faithful from the front, his sword blazing like a star. He moved through the battle like a force of nature, unstoppable and relentless. But there was no joy in his fighting, no triumph in his victories. Every rebel he struck down, he mourned. He found himself facing an angel named Azazel, one of Lucifer's chief lieutenants. Azazel had once been a master craftsman, creating beautiful things for the glory of God. Now his hands held a weapon, and his eyes held only hatred. "Michael," Azazel snarled, circling him, "the great defender, the loyal servant. Does it not tire you, always bowing, always obeying, never thinking for yourself?" "I think more than you know," Michael replied calmly. "The difference is, I do not let pride deceive me into believing my thoughts are wiser than God's." "Pride?" Azazel laughed bitterly. "You call it pride to want freedom, to refuse to be a slave." "You were never a slave," Michael said sadly. "You were a son." And you traded that for nothing. With a roar of rage, Azazel attacked. Their weapons met in a shower of sparks. They fought across the battlefield, neither giving ground, both wielding their blades with masterful skill. But gradually, inevitably, Michael's superior discipline began to tell. A feint to the left, a parry, a swift strike that got past Azazel's guard. The rebel angel fell to his knees, his weapon clattering from his hand. The light began to fade from his form, shadows creeping in where radiance had once dwelt. Michael stood over him, his sword raised for the final blow. But he hesitated. "Please," he said quietly, "even now, it is not too late. Renounce this rebellion. Ask for mercy." Azazel looked up at him, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Regret, longing, the ghost of what he had once been. But then his face hardened. "I would rather fall forever than bow for even a moment." Michael's heart broke, but his duty remained clear. "Then fall you shall," he said, and brought his sword down. Azazel's scream echoed across the battlefield as the light left him entirely, as he became something twisted, something fallen, something that would haunt the earth for ages to come. Michael turned away, unable to watch the transformation. His hands trembled on his sword. How many more? How many more brothers would he have to strike down before this was over? While Michael fought in the center, the battle raged across the entire expanse of heaven. The faithful held their ground, but barely. The rebels fought with the desperation of those who knew they were losing, throwing themselves forward in wave after wave of attacks. Raphael moved through the chaos, his staff glowing as he healed the wounded and protected the weak. But even his power had limits. There were too many injured, too much pain, too much loss. He knelt beside a young angel who had been struck down, her wings shattered, her light fading. She looked up at him with eyes full of fear and confusion. "Why?" she whispered. "Why is this happening? Why are we fighting each other?" Raphael had no answer. He placed his hand on her forehead, channeling healing light into her broken form. "Rest," he said gently. "Be at peace." But even as he spoke the words, he wondered if peace would ever return to heaven. Across the field, Gabriel fought with cold efficiency. Unlike Michael, who fought with sorrow, Gabriel fought with anger. Anger at the waste, at the stupidity, at the arrogance that had brought them to this point. He cut through the rebel lines like a blade through water, his spear finding its mark again and again. But for every rebel he struck down, two more seemed to take their place. They were not winning fast enough. The rebels were being defeated, but slowly, at terrible cost. At this rate, the battle could go on for days, weeks, and heaven, beautiful, perfect heaven, would be left scarred beyond recognition. As the day wore on, the tide began to turn more decisively. The rebels, despite their fierce courage, were losing ground. Their ranks were thinning, their strength failing. The promises Lucifer had made, the visions of easy victory he had painted, were proving to be lies. Some began to break, to flee, to throw down their weapons and try to escape the battlefield. But there was nowhere to go. Heaven was not infinite. There were no corners to hide in, no shadows to disappear into. And the faithful showed no mercy to deserters. By midday, Lucifer could see that his grand assault had failed. His forces had not broken through to the throne. They had barely made a dent in the faithful's defenses, and he had lost thousands more of his followers. Rage and desperation warred within him. He had been so certain, so confident. How could this be happening? He looked around at his dwindling army, saw the fear in their eyes, the doubt creeping in, and he made a decision. If he could not win through strategy, he would win through power. He would challenge Michael directly. He would prove, once and for all, that he was the superior being. He spread his wings and rose above the battlefield, his voice thundering across the chaos. "Michael," he shouted. "Michael, I know you can hear me. Stop hiding behind your soldiers. Face me yourself if you dare." The fighting slowed as angels on both sides turned to look. Michael stood in the center of the battlefield, his armor dented and scorched, his face streaked with the residue of battle. He looked up at Lucifer hovering above and felt a deep weariness settle over him. This was what it had come to. Brother against brother. The final confrontation. He had hoped to avoid this. Had hoped that Lucifer might be defeated without it coming to a personal duel. But hope, it seemed, was a fragile thing in war. Slowly, Michael sheathed his sword and began to rise, his wings carrying him upward until he hovered level with Lucifer, the two of them suspended above the battlefield like opposing stars. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. "It did not have to be this way," Michael said quietly. "Yes, it did," Lucifer replied. "From the moment I was created less than him, this was inevitable. You were not created less. You were created different, with a different purpose, a different glory." Lucifer's eyes blazed. "I was created to bow. I refuse." "Then you refuse life itself," Michael said. "Because in all creation, everything bows to something greater than itself. That is the order of things. That is love." "Then I will create a new order," Lucifer said, "and love will have no place in it." Michael drew his sword one final time. The blade sang as it left its sheath, burning with white fire. "So be it," he said, and his voice was filled with infinite sadness. "Let us end this." Lucifer summoned his own weapon, a blade of darkness that seemed to swallow the light around it. And the two archangels, once brothers, once friends, prepared to destroy each other. The second day was ending, but the final battle was just beginning. Chapter 7. Day 3. Michael versus Lucifer. The third day dawned with a strange stillness. Across the battlefield, the armies had withdrawn, forming two vast semicircles with a wide space between them. This was no longer a battle of thousands. This had become something more personal, more terrible. A duel. In the center of that empty space, two angels faced each other. Michael, the archangel, commander of the heavenly host, defender of the throne. His armor was battered but whole. His wings, though scorched from 2 days of battle, still shone with pure light. His sword blazed in his hand, reflecting the glory of God. And Lucifer, the morning star, the light-bearer, the most beautiful being ever created. But his beauty was changing now. The light that had once radiated from him was dimming, being replaced by something darker. His wings, once covered in every precious stone, were losing their luster. His face, once perfect, was twisted with rage and desperate pride. They circled each other slowly, weapons raised, eyes locked. Around them, millions of angels watched in absolute silence. The faithful on one side, praying for Michael's victory. The rebels on the other, their last hope resting on Lucifer's shoulders. Even the throne seemed to dim, as if God himself was watching, waiting, allowing this final choice to play out. "You can still stop this," Michael said, his voice carrying across the silence. "Lay down your sword. Kneel. Ask for mercy." Lucifer's laugh was bitter. "How many times will you offer me slavery and call it mercy?" "It is not slavery to love the one who made you," Michael replied. "It is the highest freedom." "You are a fool," Lucifer said coldly. "You fight for a throne that will never be yours. You serve a master who does not share his glory. You waste your strength defending a tyrant." "He is no tyrant," Michael said firmly. "He is our father. and I will not let you desecrate his throne." "Then defend it," Lucifer snarled. "If you can." He struck first, his dark blade cutting through the air with terrible speed. Michael parried, his sword meeting Lucifer's with a sound like thunder. The impact sent shockwaves rippling across the battlefield, causing angels on both sides to stumble. They broke apart, circled, struck again. The duel was unlike anything heaven had ever witnessed. These were not ordinary angels. These were archangels, beings of immense power and skill, created by God to be leaders among the host. Lucifer fought with brilliant aggression, his blade moving in complex patterns, attacking from multiple angles, seeking any opening in Michael's defense. His movements were beautiful, artistic, like a deadly dance. He had been created for glory, and even in rebellion, that glory showed through. But Michael fought with something stronger than skill or beauty. He fought with purpose. Every block, every parry, every counterstrike was made not for his own honor, but for the defense of the throne. He did not fight to prove himself superior. He fought because it was right, because it was necessary, because someone had to stand against the darkness, and God had chosen him. Their blades met again and again, neither gaining clear advantage. They fought across the crystal sea, their wings carrying them through the air in a deadly ballet. Sparks flew where their weapons clashed, falling like stars toward the ground below. Lucifer pressed the attack, his strikes coming faster, harder, more desperate. He could feel his strength waning, could feel the light draining from him with every passing moment. The rebellion had cost him more than he had realized. The act of turning away from God was not without consequence. He was becoming less, even as he fought to become more. "You are weakening," Michael observed, his voice sad. "Your power comes from him. By rejecting him, you reject your own strength." "I have strength enough to defeat you," Lucifer roared, launching a furious assault. But Michael weathered it, his defense unshakable. He waited, patient, until Lucifer overextended, and then he struck. His blade cut across Lucifer's side, drawing first blood. Lucifer cried out, not in pain, but in shock. He had never been wounded before, had never known what it felt like to hurt. He looked down at himself and saw something impossible. Where Michael's sword had touched him, his light was going out. The wound was not healing. Instead, darkness was spreading from it like a stain. "What have you done?" he whispered. "Nothing," Michael said quietly. "This is what happens when you separate yourself from the source of all life. You begin to die. Angels cannot die." "No," Michael agreed, "but they can fall. And you are falling, brother. Even now, even as you stand here, you are falling away from everything you were meant to be." Lucifer touched the wound on his side, and his hand came away dark, not with blood, but with something worse. The absence of light, the presence of void. Terror flashed across his face, quickly replaced by rage. "If I am falling," he snarled, "then I will take you with me." He attacked with renewed fury, abandoning all technique, all strategy, fighting with pure desperation. His blade moved like lightning, striking again and again, trying to overwhelm Michael through sheer aggression. But desperation is not strength, and rage is not skill. Michael blocked each strike, his movements economical, efficient. He did not waste energy, did not allow emotion to cloud his judgment. He simply fought with the calm assurance of one who knows he stands on the side of righteousness. And slowly, inexorably, he began to drive Lucifer back. Across the battlefield, the angels watched in growing tension. The faithful began to hope, the rebels began to fear. Beelzebub, watching from the rebel lines, felt his heart sink. He could see what was happening. could see the way Lucifer's movements were becoming more erratic, more wild, could see the darkness spreading across his once radiant form. "We are going to lose," he whispered to the angel beside him. "We cannot lose," the angel replied, but his voice was uncertain. "Lucifer is the greatest of us. He cannot be defeated." But even as he spoke, they both knew it was a lie. The duel raged on, minute after minute, hour after hour. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, each moment feeling both endless and fleeting. Lucifer was tiring. His wings, once so powerful, now struggled to keep him aloft. His sword, once wielded with perfect precision, now trembled in his grip. Michael remained steady, his strength sustained by something beyond himself. He drew power not from pride, but from purpose. Not from ambition, but from love. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lucifer made a mistake. He lunged forward, putting all his remaining strength into one final, desperate strike aimed at Michael's heart. Michael sidestepped, and Lucifer's blade passed harmlessly by. And in that moment, in that fraction of a second, when Lucifer was overextended and off balance, Michael struck. Not with his sword, but with his shield. He brought it up in a powerful blow that caught Lucifer in the chest, sending him tumbling backward through the air. Lucifer fell, his wings unable to catch him, and crashed onto the crystal sea. The impact sent cracks spreading across its surface like a spider web. He tried to rise, but his strength was gone. He pushed himself up on one arm, his sword lying just out of reach, his wings dragging on the ground behind him. Michael descended slowly, landing a few paces away. His sword was still raised, still burning with holy fire. The two of them locked eyes one final time. "It is over," Michael said softly. "You have lost." Lucifer's face contorted with hatred, with denial, with the absolute refusal to accept reality. "No," he gasped. "No, I cannot lose. I am Lucifer. I am the morning star. I am." "You are fallen," Michael interrupted, and his voice was filled with unbearable sadness. "And I am sorry, my brother. I am so sorry." He raised his sword for the final blow, but before he could strike, the voice of God echoed across heaven. "Enough." Michael froze, his blade still raised. "Step aside, Michael. His punishment is not yours to deliver." Michael bowed his head, lowered his sword, and moved back. Lucifer, still on the ground, looked up toward the throne. For the first time since his rebellion began, fear showed clearly on his face. The light of God's presence grew brighter, more intense, until it was almost unbearable to look upon. And from that light, words came forth, words that would echo through all of eternity. "Lucifer, son of the morning, how you have fallen from heaven." The words were not shouted, they were spoken quietly, with infinite sorrow. "You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of assembly. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High." Each word struck like a hammer, and with each word Lucifer felt himself diminishing, shrinking, becoming less. "But you shall be brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit." And then the final judgment was pronounced. "You are cast out. You, and all who followed you. No longer shall you dwell in my presence. No longer shall you bear the name of light-bearer. From this day forth you shall be called Satan, the adversary, and your dwelling place shall be the earth until the time of final judgment." The throne blazed with light, and that light became a force, a wind, a mighty hand that lifted Lucifer and all his followers from the crystal sea. They rose into the air, struggling, screaming, their wings useless against the power of God. And then, With a sound like thunder, they were hurled downward, down from heaven, down through the realms, down toward the earth below. The fall had begun, and it would be a long, long fall. Chapter 8. The Fall. There are no words in any human language that can truly describe what it means to fall from heaven. It is not simply a physical descent, though that is part of it. It is not merely being cast out, though that too is real. It is something deeper, more terrible, more complete. It is the loss of everything. As Lucifer and his followers were hurled from the presence of God, they felt it all slipping away. The light that had sustained them since the moment of their creation began to fade. The glory that had covered them like a garment started to unravel. The joy that had been as natural to them as breathing turned to ashes in their mouths. They fell through layers of reality that humans can barely conceive of, tumbling down through the spaces between heaven and earth, spinning out of control, their wings useless, their voices raised in screams that echoed through the void. Lucifer fell at the front, his arms outstretched, his face twisted in rage and denial and dawning horror. His wings, which had once been covered with sapphire and emerald, ruby and topaz, began to change. The precious stones cracked and fell away like scales. The feathers, once white as snow and soft as silk, became dark and brittle. Some broke off entirely, scattering into the void like ashes on the wind. His skin, which had glowed with inner radiance, began to dim. The light that had emanated from every pore flickered like a dying candle, growing weaker with every passing moment. And the worst part was not the physical transformation. It was the spiritual one. For the first time in his existence, Lucifer felt cold. Not the pleasant coolness of a mountain stream or a gentle breeze, but a deep, bone-chilling cold that seemed to seep in from the darkness around him. It was the cold of separation, of being cut off from the source of all warmth, all life, all love. He tried to speak, to cry out, to call upon the power he had once commanded. But his voice, which had once led the worship of heaven, now sounded harsh and broken. "No," he gasped, his words swallowed by the rushing wind of his descent. "No, this cannot be. I am Lucifer. I am the morning star. I am meant for glory, not for this." But the void did not answer. It simply swallowed him, pulling him down, down, down. Behind him, his followers fell in a vast cascade, like stars dropping from the sky. There were thousands of them, angels who had believed his promises, who had followed his rebellion, who had chosen pride over love. Now they were paying the price. One angel, who had once stood among the cherubim, watched in horror as his four faces began to distort, to twist into something grotesque. The face of a man became cruel and twisted. The face of a lion became savage and feral. The face of an ox became brutish and dull. The face of an eagle became predatory and vicious. He tried to cover his face with his hands, but his hands too were changing, the fingers elongating into claws, the skin turning rough and dark. Another angel, who had been a messenger, felt her voice changing. The musical tones that had once announced the decrees of God now came out in harsh whispers, in sounds that grated on the ear rather than blessed it. She tried to sing, tried to recall the hymns of heaven, but the words would not come. They had been taken from her, lost in the fall, replaced by something darker. All around, the transformation continued. Angels who had been created for beauty, for worship, for service, were becoming something else. Something twisted, something fallen. They were becoming demons. Beelzebub, who had been one of Lucifer's chief lieutenants, felt his mind changing along with his body. Thoughts that had once been clear and pure were becoming muddied, confused. He tried to remember why he had followed Lucifer, what promises had seemed so appealing, what vision had been worth abandoning heaven for. But he could not remember clearly. It all seemed hazy now, like a dream fading upon waking. Had he really believed they could overthrow God? Had he actually thought that rebellion could succeed? The realization of what he had done, what he had lost, hit him like a physical blow. He opened his mouth and screamed, a sound of pure anguish that mixed with the thousands of other screams surrounding him. They had traded everything for nothing. The fall seemed to last forever, though in reality it may have been only moments. Time moved strangely in that place between realms, stretching and compressing like a living thing. As they descended, the light of heaven receded above them, growing smaller and smaller, until it was just a distant point of brightness in the vast darkness. Some of the falling angels reached toward it desperately, their hands grasping at nothing, trying to grab hold of something that was already gone. "Please," one angel cried out. "Please, have mercy. I repent. I was wrong. Let me come back." But there was no answer. The time for repentance had passed. The choice had been made. The line had been crossed, and there is no crossing back. Lucifer heard the cries of his followers and felt something he had never experienced before. Not guilt, not exactly. He was still too proud for that. But something close to it. A recognition that he had led them here, that their suffering was because of him, that he bore responsibility for their fate. He pushed the feeling away, buried it beneath layers of anger and defiance. He could not afford to feel guilt, could not afford to question. If he allowed himself to acknowledge that he had been wrong, that he had destroyed himself and thousands of others for nothing, the weight of it would crush him entirely. So instead, he clung to his rage, nursed it, fed it, let it grow until it filled all the empty spaces where light had once dwelt. If he could not have heaven, he would have revenge. If he could not sit on the throne of God, he would do everything in his power to hurt the one who sat there. If he could not be exalted, he would drag down as many others as he could. These thoughts sustained him as he fell, giving him purpose, giving him something to hold on to in the darkness. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of falling, they saw it. Below them, growing larger with every passing moment, was the earth. It was different from heaven. Where heaven had been made of light and crystal and glory, the earth was made of dirt and stone and water. It was a physical place, bound by time and gravity and natural law. It was beautiful in its own way, with green forests and blue oceans and mountains that touched the clouds. But to the falling angels, it looked like a prison. They struck the earth with tremendous force, crashing into mountains, plunging into seas, cratering the ground where they landed. The impact should have destroyed them, should have shattered their forms entirely. But they could not die. That was both their blessing and their curse. They were eternal beings, created to exist forever. Even in their fallen state, even transformed into something dark and twisted, they could not cease to be. Lucifer hit the earth in a remote wilderness, a place of rocks and sand and burning heat. The impact created a crater, sending up a cloud of dust that took hours to settle. He lay there for a long time, unmoving, his mind struggling to comprehend what had happened. Just days ago, he had stood before the throne of God. He had led the worship of heaven. He had been the most beautiful, the most glorious, the most exalted of all created beings. Now he was here, cast down, broken, fallen. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself to his feet. His wings, once his pride, now hung from his back like tattered rags. His body, once radiant with light, was covered in shadows. His face, once perfect, was marked by the corruption of pride and rage. He looked down at his hands and saw that they were no longer the hands of an angel. They were darker now, harder, bearing the marks of what he had become. He threw back his head and screamed, a sound of pure fury and loss that echoed across the wilderness. "I will not bow," he shouted at the sky, at the distant heaven he could no longer reach. "Do you hear me? I will never bow. You have cast me out, but you have not defeated me. I will have my revenge. I will turn your precious creation against you. I will." His words dissolved into incoherent rage, and he fell to his knees, pounding his fists against the ground. Around him, across the face of the earth, his followers were picking themselves up, assessing their new forms, coming to terms with their new reality. Some wept. Some raged. Some simply sat in stunned silence, too broken to react at all. They had fallen from heaven. They had lost everything, and there was no way back. But Lucifer, even in his brokenness, even in his defeat, was already planning, already scheming, already preparing his next move. If he could not have heaven, he would make earth his kingdom. If he could not overthrow God, he would at least corrupt his creation. If he could not ascend, he would drag down as many souls as he could. He stood once more, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his jaw set with grim determination. "This is not over," he whispered. "This war has only just begun." And in that moment, Satan was born. Not just a fallen angel, but an active adversary. Not just cast out, but committed to opposition. Not just defeated, but defiant to the end. The morning star had fallen, and in his place stood the father of lies, the prince of darkness, the enemy of all that is good. Heaven had won the battle, but the war for the souls of mankind was about to begin. Chapter 9. The Aftermath in Heaven. When the last of the rebels had fallen, when the final scream had faded into the distance, heaven was silent. It was not the peaceful silence that had once filled that holy place, the quiet contentment of perfect harmony. This was a different silence. Heavy, wounded. The silence of a battlefield after the fighting has ended. Michael stood at the edge of the crystal sea, looking down toward the earth far below. His sword was still in his hand, though the fire that had blazed from it during the battle had dimmed to a faint glow. His armor was dented and scorched. His wings drooped with exhaustion. But it was not physical weariness that bowed his shoulders. It was the weight of what had just transpired. 1/3 of heaven's host. 1/3 of all the angels ever created. Gone. Cast out. Fallen. He had known many of them, had fought beside them, had worshipped beside them, had called them brothers and sisters. Now they were enemies. Now they were demons. Now they would spend eternity in opposition to everything they had once served. Gabriel approached quietly, placing a hand on Michael's shoulder. He did not speak. There were no words adequate for this moment. Behind them, the faithful angels were gathering, drawn together by shared trauma, by the need for comfort, by the simple desire not to be alone with their grief. Raphael moved among them, his face wet with tears, his staff glowing as he tended to the wounded. There were fewer physical injuries than one might expect from 3 days of war, but the spiritual wounds ran deep. An angel who had fought beside her best friend, only to watch that friend choose rebellion and fall, stood trembling, her hands covering her face. Raphael embraced her gently, letting her weep against his shoulder. Another angel, who had been forced to strike down his own brother in the fighting, knelt on the crystal ground, staring at his hands as if seeing blood on them that would never wash away. Throughout heaven, similar scenes played out. Angels struggling to comprehend what had happened, trying to understand how paradise could have been shattered so completely, wondering if things would ever be the same again. After a time, the faithful began to move toward the throne, not in organized ranks as they once had, but in small groups, seeking comfort in the presence of the one who had not changed, who could not change, who remained constant even when everything else fell apart. The throne still blazed with the same glory it always had. The light that emanated from it was still pure, still warm, still welcoming. God had not diminished. Heaven's beauty had not faded, but something had changed. The angels approached the throne differently now, with a deeper reverence, with a greater understanding of what they had. Before the rebellion, worship had been natural, easy, joyful. It had been like breathing, something done without thought or effort. Now it was a choice, a conscious decision, a declaration that despite everything they had witnessed, despite the terrible price of rebellion, they still chose God, still chose love, still chose to bow. Michael was the first to kneel before the throne. He planted his sword in the ground before him, bowed his head, and simply stayed there, silent. One by one, the others followed. Gabriel knelt beside him. Raphael knelt on his other side. Uriel knelt behind them, and then thousands more, covering the expanse before the throne, all of them choosing, in that moment, to reaffirm their loyalty. No one sang, no one spoke. They simply knelt in silence, offering the only thing they had left to give, their presence, their faithfulness, their broken but unshaken devotion. And from the throne, light poured out over them like a healing balm, not erasing the pain, not making them forget what had happened, but strengthening them, sustaining them, reminding them that they were loved, that they were valued, that their choice to remain faithful meant something. After a long while, the voice of God spoke, gentle as a whisper, yet heard by every angel present. My faithful ones, my beloved, you have stood firm when others fell. You have chosen light when darkness beckoned. You have loved me, not because you had to, but because you chose to. The words wrapped around them like an embrace. I know your grief, the voice continued. I share it. Every angel that fell was precious to me. I gave them the freedom to choose, knowing some would choose wrongly. And that knowledge brings me pain beyond your understanding. Michael raised his head slightly, surprised. He had never considered that God might grieve, that the one who knew all things, who saw all outcomes, might still be hurt by the choices of his creation. But I do not regret creating them, God said. Love without choice is not love at all. It is merely programming. I wanted children, not puppets. And true children must be free to reject their father, even though such rejection breaks his heart. Throughout the assembly, angels wept at these words. Not tears of sadness alone, but tears of understanding. They glimpsed, just for a moment, the depth of God's love. A love so great that it would risk being rejected. A love so profound that it would endure even betrayal. The rebellion is over, God declared, but its consequences will echo through eternity. Satan and his followers are cast out, but they are not destroyed. They will have their time to rage, to corrupt, to oppose. And one day, they will face final judgment. The voice paused, and when it spoke again, there was something new in it. A promise, a hope, but even in this darkness, light will prevail. For I have a plan, set in motion before the foundation of the world. A plan of redemption, a plan that will bring good from this evil, hope from this despair, victory from this defeat. Michael listened intently, longing to understand. I will create a new race, God said. Beings made in my image, formed from the dust of the earth. They will be called humans, and they will be given the same choice you were given. Satan will tempt them, will try to drag them down as he fell, and many will choose as he chose. The angels stirred uneasily, troubled by this revelation. But And here the voice grew stronger, filled with determination and love beyond measure. I will not abandon them to their fall. I will go down myself. I will take their form, bear their burdens, pay the price for their rebellion. I will do what no one could do for the fallen angels. I will offer redemption. A murmur of wonder rippled through the assembly. God himself would descend, would take on flesh, would enter creation in such a direct, vulnerable way. And when the time is right, God continued, when the plan is complete, Satan will be judged. The fallen will face their reckoning, and those who have chosen light, both angel and human, will dwell together in a new heaven and a new earth. A place where rebellion is impossible because everyone there will have chosen to be there. Where love is pure because it is freely given. The vision unfolded before them, vast and beautiful and almost too wonderful to comprehend. Until that day, God said, you have work to do. You will watch over the humans I will create. You will minister to them, protect them, guide them. You will war against the forces of darkness, not with swords as you did here, but with truth and love and faithful service. Michael felt purpose settling back into his soul. The grief remained, but it no longer paralyzed him. There was work to be done, a mission to fulfill, a future to fight for. Will you stand with me? God asked, though he already knew the answer. Will you serve in this new age, this age of grace and redemption? As one, the angels rose to their feet. As one, they raised their voices in affirmation. We will serve, they declared. We will stand. We will fight. Not for ourselves, but for love. Not for glory, but for good. Not because we must, but because we choose to. And heaven rang with their commitment, a sound that echoed across all of creation. In the days that followed, heaven began to heal. The physical damage from the battle was repaired. The cracks in the crystal sea were mended. The scorch marks faded. The broken structures were rebuilt. But the emotional scars took longer. Angels spoke in hushed voices about friends who had fallen. They wondered what had become of them, whether they suffered, whether any part of their former selves remained. Michael forbade any attempt to contact the fallen. They have made their choice, he said firmly. To reach out to them now would only bring more pain, for them and for us. Instead, the faithful focused on remembering. They told stories of the fallen as they had been before the rebellion. They honored the good that had once been in them, while acknowledging the tragedy of what they had become. Slowly, carefully, worship began again. At first, it was tentative, marked by the absence of voices that had once led it. But gradually, new voices rose to fill the gaps. New songs were composed, songs that spoke of faithfulness tested and proven, of love that endures even through betrayal, of hope that survives even in darkness. Gabriel took on new responsibilities, becoming God's primary messenger to the created realms. He would be the one to announce births and deaths, victories and judgments, always carrying the word of God with precision and power. Raphael continued his work of healing, but with a deeper understanding of the wounds that cannot be seen. He learned to comfort not just bodies, but souls. And Michael, the warrior, the defender, took up his eternal post. He stood between heaven and earth, between light and darkness, his sword always ready, his vigilance never wavering. For he knew, as they all knew, that the war was not truly over. It had simply moved to a new battlefield. And when God created humanity, when Satan began his work of corruption and temptation, the angels would be there. Not to fight with swords this time, but to serve, to protect, to guide, to stand as proof that even in the face of darkness, light can prevail. Even after the worst has happened, hope remains. Even when heaven itself has been torn apart, love endures. And one day, When all things are made new, when the plan of redemption is complete, there will be no more rebellion, no more war, no more tears. There will be only worship, only joy, only love. But until that day, the faithful angels kept their watch, and heaven, though wounded, still shone with undiminished glory. Chapter 10. What became of the fallen? After the fall, after the impact, after the dust settled and the screams faded into silence, the fallen angels found themselves in a world they did not understand. Earth was not heaven. It had beauty, yes, but it was a different kind of beauty. Raw, untamed, bound by laws of nature that felt restrictive and strange to beings who had once moved freely through realms of pure spirit. Here, gravity pulled at them. Time moved in one direction, relentless and unchanging. The light came from a sun that rose and set, rather than from the presence of God that never dimmed. And they were alone. In heaven, they had always been surrounded by the presence of others, by the constant awareness of God, by the sense of being part of something greater than themselves. Even in rebellion, even as they chose to separate themselves, that presence had still been there, a constant they had taken for granted. Now it was gone. The silence was deafening. Satan, who had once been Lucifer, stood in the wasteland where he had fallen and felt the full weight of his isolation. He reached out with his spirit, trying to sense the divine presence that had always been there, trying to feel the connection that had sustained him from the moment of his creation. There was nothing, only emptiness, a void where God's presence had once been. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This was what he had chosen. This separation, this exile, this aloneness. For a moment, just a brief moment, something like regret flickered through him. He remembered what it had been like to stand before the throne, to bask in that light, to feel loved and valued and whole. But he crushed the feeling immediately, buried it beneath layers of anger and defiance. To acknowledge regret would be to admit he had been wrong. And if he was wrong, then everything he had done, everything he had sacrificed, everything he had destroyed, had been for nothing. He could not face that truth. So he transformed his pain into rage, his loneliness into hatred, his loss into a burning desire for revenge. If he could not have heaven, he would make sure heaven suffered for casting him out. Across the earth, the other fallen angels were having similar experiences. Each one dealt with their new reality in different ways. Some, like Beelzebub, threw themselves into action. They could not undo what had been done, could not return to what they had lost, so they focused on the future. On building a new kingdom, on establishing order in the chaos of their fall. Beelzebub gathered others around him, organizing them, giving them purpose. "We are fallen," he told them, "but we are not defeated. We may have lost heaven, but we have gained something else. Freedom. The freedom to build our own kingdom, to make our own rules, to be our own masters." It was a lie, of course. They were not free. They were bound by their own choices, imprisoned by their own pride. But it was a comforting lie, and many clung to it desperately. Others did not adapt so well. An angel named Azazel, who had taught humans the secrets of warfare in the days before the flood, wandered the earth in torment. He could not forget what he had been, could not accept what he had become. The transformation from angel to demon was not merely physical. It was spiritual, psychological, existential. He would sometimes stop in his wandering and stare up at the sky, searching for even a glimpse of the heaven he had lost. But the way was barred. The path was closed. There was no going back. The knowledge drove him to the edge of madness. In his anguish, he began to lash out, to cause destruction not for any strategic purpose, but simply to release the rage and pain that consumed him. Still, others became hollow. They did not rage or scheme or wander. They simply existed, going through the motions of their dark work without passion or purpose. The light had gone out of them so completely that there was nothing left but shadow. As the fallen angels adjusted to their new existence, they discovered something disturbing. They were changing, not just in appearance, though that continued, but in nature, in essence. The goodness that had once been fundamental to their being was eroding away, like water wearing down stone. Thoughts that would have horrified them in heaven now seemed natural, even desirable. Cruelty replaced compassion. Deception replaced truth. Hatred replaced love. They were becoming the very thing they had accused God of being: tyrants, oppressors, beings who cared nothing for others, only for their own power and satisfaction. But they could not see it. Or perhaps they could see it and simply did not care. The capacity for self-reflection, for honest assessment, for repentance, had been damaged in the fall. Not destroyed completely, not yet, but weakened to the point where it could be easily ignored. And so they descended further into darkness, each choice leading to another, each sin making the next one easier, until the beings they had once been were almost unrecognizable. Satan watched this transformation in his followers with a mixture of satisfaction and contempt. Satisfaction, because their corruption proved his point. They were not meant to be servants. They were meant to be powerful, to take what they wanted, to bow to no one. Contempt, because they were weak. They had followed him into rebellion, yes, but they lacked his strength of will, his clarity of purpose. They were tools to be used, nothing more. He began to organize them, to assign them roles, to create a hierarchy that mirrored the one they had left behind in heaven. If he could not rule in heaven, he would rule here. If he could not have angels under his command, he would have demons. He appointed princes over various domains. Beelzebub became the lord of flies, master of corruption and decay. Mammon became the prince of greed, whispering to human hearts about wealth and possessions. Asmodeus became the demon of lust, twisting the gift of love into something base and destructive. Each demon was given authority over a particular sin, a particular aspect of human weakness to exploit. They were to be tempters, corrupters, destroyers of souls. And Satan himself would be the architect of it all, the mastermind behind every scheme, every temptation, every attack on the creation that God loved. But even as Satan built his dark kingdom, even as he prepared his strategies and marshaled his forces, he faced a problem. He could not create. This was perhaps the most bitter revelation of his fallen state. In heaven, he had been able to make beautiful things. His voice had created melodies that had never existed before. His imagination had shaped new forms of worship, new expressions of praise. Now, he found that capacity diminished, corrupted. He could destroy. He could twist. He could pervert. But he could not create anything genuinely new, anything truly beautiful. Every song he attempted to compose came out as a mockery of what had been. Every structure he tried to build was merely a dark reflection of heaven's glory. He could imitate, but he could not originate. The realization filled him with fresh rage. Even in rebellion, even in his supposed freedom, he was still dependent on God, still limited by the nature God had given him. Still, in a fundamental way, beneath the one he had sought to rival, it was unbearable, and it made him hate all the more. He turned his attention to the earth, studying it, learning its rhythms and patterns. God had created this world with care, had filled it with life and beauty. Satan could see the fingerprints of the divine all over creation, and he vowed to mar every single one of them. He could not destroy the earth completely. He did not have that power, but he could corrupt it. He could introduce discord where there was harmony. He could plant thorns among the flowers. He could turn creatures against each other. But his greatest opportunity, he knew, would come when God created the beings he had spoken of, the humans, the ones made in God's image, given the same choice the angels had been given. Satan smiled at the thought, a cold, cruel smile that held no joy. God wanted to give them a choice. Very well. Satan would make sure they chose wrongly. He would tempt them just as he had tempted the angels. He would promise them freedom, knowledge, equality with God. And when they fell, when they too were cast out and broken and separated from their Creator, God would understand what it felt like to be betrayed by those he loved. It would not be the same as defeating God directly. Satan understood now that such a thing was impossible. God was infinite, eternal, all-powerful. There could be no true victory against such a being. But there could be revenge. There could be the satisfaction of causing pain, of striking back, of making God regret the day he had created free will. That would have to be enough. And so the fallen angels settled into their new existence. They established themselves in the hidden places of the earth, in the shadows between light and dark, in the spiritual realm that overlapped with the physical. They became known by many names as the ages passed. Demons, devils, unclean spirits, powers of darkness, principalities and rulers of the air. But beneath all the names, beneath all the titles and roles, they remained what they had always been, fallen angels, created for glory, now dwelling in shadow, made for worship, now devoted to rebellion, meant for love, now consumed with hatred. They were not as powerful as they had been in heaven. The fall had diminished them in ways they were still discovering. They could not be everywhere at once. They could not read minds, though they could observe behavior and make educated guesses. They could not force humans to do anything, only tempt and suggest and manipulate. But they were still formidable. They were ancient, wise in the ways of deception. They knew the weaknesses of created beings because they themselves were created beings who had fallen to those same weaknesses. And they had nothing but time. Eternity stretched before them, a sentence they could not escape, a prison without walls. Some of them wondered, in the quiet moments, whether there would ever be an end to this existence, whether God's plan of judgment would eventually come to pass, whether the lake of fire that had been prepared for Satan and his angels was real or merely a threat, but most did not think that far ahead. They focused on the present, on the work of corruption and destruction, on the small victories of leading souls astray. It gave them purpose. It gave them something to do in the endless years. It gave them a reason to continue existing when existence itself had become a burden. And so they waited for God to create humanity, waited for their chance to strike back, waited for the war to begin anew, this time fought not in heaven, but on earth. The rebellion had failed. The battle had been lost. The fall was complete. But the fallen angels were not finished yet. In their pride, in their rage, in their bitter determination to oppose the God who had cast them out, they prepared for the next phase of the war. A war that would rage across millennia. A war fought not with swords and shields, but with lies and temptations. A war for the souls of mankind. And though they did not know it, though they could not see it, their very existence served a purpose in God's greater plan. For every soul that resisted their temptations became stronger. Every human who chose light over darkness, truth over lies, love over hatred, proved that free will could be wielded rightly. The fallen angels thought they were opposing God's plan. In reality, they were part of it. And one day, when the final judgment came, when the books were opened and every deed was brought to light, they would understand the futility of their rebellion. But that day was still far off. For now, they dwelt in darkness, plotting, scheming, corrupting, fallen but not destroyed, defeated but not ended, angels no longer, but demons forever. This is what became of the fallen, and this is what awaits all who choose pride over humility, self over service, darkness over light. Not annihilation, which would be a mercy, but eternal existence in separation from the source of all joy, all love, all life. A living death that never ends, a fall that has no bottom. This is the price of rebellion, and it is a price that can never be repaid. Reflections and rest. And so we come to the end of this story. The story of 3 days that changed eternity. The story of how the morning star became the prince of darkness. The story of the greatest rebellion ever to shake the foundations of creation. But before you drift into sleep, before you let this tale carry you into the realm of dreams, let us reflect on what we have heard tonight. The lesson of pride. Lucifer's fall began with a single thought. I am magnificent. And that thought was true. He was magnificent. God had made him that way. But the thought did not stop there. It grew, twisted, transformed from a truth into a lie. From I am magnificent to I deserve worship to I am equal to God. This is the danger of pride. It takes something good, something true, and perverts it. It whispers that we are more than we are, that we deserve more than we have been given, that we should be served rather than serve. And pride always, always leads to destruction. Not because God punishes pride out of spite or insecurity, but because pride separates us from the source of all life. It is like a branch deciding it no longer needs the tree. The tree does not punish the branch. The branch simply withers and dies because it has cut itself off from what sustains it. If you remember nothing else from this story, remember this. Humility is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the recognition that we are created beings, dependent on our Creator, and that this dependence is not slavery, but love. The cost of choice. God could have created beings who had no choice but to obey. Beings programmed to worship, incapable of rebellion. But he did not want puppets. He wanted children. And true children must be free to choose. The angels were given that freedom, and 1/3 of them chose wrongly. Humanity would be given the same freedom, and many, many would choose wrongly. But without that freedom, love means nothing. Obedience means nothing. Worship means nothing. Choice is a terrible gift. It comes with the risk of tragedy, of heartbreak, of loss. But it is also the foundation of everything that makes existence meaningful. The fallen angels misused their freedom. They chose self over God, pride over love, rebellion over service. And they paid the price. But the faithful angels and the humans who would follow used their freedom to choose rightly, to choose love even when hatred seemed more satisfying, to choose service even when power seemed more attractive, to choose humility even when pride seemed more reasonable. And in that choice, they found something the fallen never could. True freedom. The freedom that comes not from casting off all restraint, but from willingly submitting to what is good and right and true. The tragedy of what was lost. Sometimes, in our telling of this story, we focus on Satan as a villain, as an enemy to be defeated, and he is those things. But tonight, I want you to remember what he was before he fell. A being of breathtaking beauty, a worship leader whose voice led all of heaven in praise. a creation so magnificent that even in his fallen state, his power is formidable. Think of all that was lost when he fell. All the songs he would have sung, all the worship he would have led, all the beauty he would have created. God lost something precious that day. Not because Satan's absence diminished God in any way, but because a father grieves when his child turns away from him. Heaven lost something too. A brilliant light was extinguished. A glorious voice was silenced. And 1/3 of all the angels were cast out. The tragedy of the fall is not just about punishment and justice. It is about loss. About what could have been, but never will be. And if you ever find yourself tempted to pride, to rebellion, to thinking you know better than God, remember what Lucifer lost. And ask yourself if any imagined freedom is worth that price. The hope that remains, but this story, for all its tragedy, is not without hope, because God did not respond to rebellion with annihilation. He responded with a plan of redemption that would extend even to those who had fallen, though in a different way than the angels. The fallen angels cannot be saved. Their choice was final, their nature too fundamentally corrupted. But humans, who would fall in their own way, would be offered something the angels were not: a redeemer, a savior. God himself would come down, would take on flesh, would pay the price for human rebellion so that humanity could be restored. The angels watched this plan unfold with wonder. Those who remained faithful serve it with joy, acting as messengers and protectors and warriors in the ongoing battle for human souls. And somewhere, in the depths of his pride, Satan rages against it. But his rage is impotent. The plan will succeed. Redemption will come. And those who choose light will dwell forever in the presence of God. The war that began in heaven continues on earth. But the outcome is not in doubt. Light will triumph over darkness. Love will conquer hate. And every knee, even Satan's, will one day bow before the throne. Not because God forces them, but because in the end, truth is undeniable. And the truth is that God is God, and there is no other. A word to the weary. If you are listening to this tonight, perhaps it is because you are struggling with your own battles, your own temptations, your own moments of pride or doubt or rebellion. Know this: you are not alone. The war that began with Lucifer's fall continues in every human heart. The choice between light and darkness, between humility and pride, between love and selfishness, is a choice we all face every single day. But unlike the angels, you have been given something precious: the opportunity to repent, to turn back, to choose again, even after choosing wrongly. That is grace. That is mercy. That is the gift that the fallen angels did not receive, but you have. Do not waste it. Do not let pride convince you that you are beyond forgiveness, or that you know better than God, or that rebellion will somehow set you free. It will not. It never does. It only leads to the same fall that Lucifer experienced. But humility, repentance, and surrender to the God who loves you, that leads to life, to joy, to the very freedom that pride promises but can never deliver. Rest now. The story is finished. The war in heaven is over. The fallen have been cast out. The faithful remain in glory. And you, dear listener, are safe, protected by angels who did not fall, loved by a God who will never cast you out if you come to him with a sincere heart. Let this story settle into your mind as you drift towards sleep. Let it remind you that the battles you face are real, but they are not new. They have been fought since before time began. And let it comfort you to know that light has already won. The fallen angels may rage. Satan may scheme. Darkness may seem to prevail for a season. But the morning is coming. The true morning, when the light of God's presence will banish every shadow, when all things will be made new, when those who have chosen rightly will dwell in joy forever. Until that morning, rest in His love, rest in His protection, rest in the knowledge that you are not fighting alone. The angels who remained faithful watch over you even now. Michael stands guard. Raphael brings healing. Gabriel carries messages of hope. And above them all, the God who created you, who knows you, who loves you beyond measure, keeps watch through the night. Sleep peacefully, beloved. The war in heaven is over, and in the end, love wins. Always and forever, love wins. Good night. May God's peace be upon you, and may you wake tomorrow with the strength to choose light over darkness, humility over pride, and love over all. Amen.